Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning. Okay, just a couple of thoughts before we get going. Excuse me. I think we continue to do an excellent job in staying focused. And as the Thanksgiving week and Thanksgiving holiday approaches, I want to make sure that we don't lose that focus and that discipline. There'll be a tendency to move to softer and more featurey items, and I think that would be a mistake. There is so much news going on both the coronavirus side and on the Biden transition and the Trump administration. I want to make sure we are fully focused on all the news. Stay newsy, stay urgent, and most importantly, continue to play error-free ball here. It's really important. Everybody is focused on us, and making sure that we continue not to give them any fodder is really important. Our competition is really confused right now. And so this is an extraordinary time for us as everybody continues to look to us for what is going on. We don't talk often on this call about our audience numbers, but I do think it is worth noting, and I do want to take one moment to let everybody know that CNN has been the number one cable news network in total day demos, which is really the singular marker by which we track our success. Total day demos, CNN has been number one for 12 days in a row. That is the longest winning streak for CNN in cable news in 19 years, since a 43-day streak began on September the 10th, 2001, the day before 9/11. So I think it's really significant that for 12 days in a row, we have been number one, and we haven't seen anything like that in 19 years. The audience is telling us that they trust us. The audience is telling us that we're giving them the news, and the audience is there for us. Let's make sure we continue to deliver for that. With that, I want to begin today with what is going on in COVID, and for that, I want to start with Matthew.
Good morning, Jeff. So obviously, the second huge vaccine announcement, which comes against the backdrop of this dire new era of case growth and rising deaths and drastic new restrictions. The breaking news this morning, Moderna announcing its vaccine is almost 95% effective, safe, protects against severe illness, and very importantly, has a longer and more flexible shelf life than Pfizer's at a higher temperature. Neither company has submitted to the FDA yet. Again, the timeline from Fauci this morning, end of December, for the first shots to the highest risk groups. Meanwhile, the U.S. crosses 11 million cases, over 1 million in the last week alone. Yesterday was the highest ever Sunday for case numbers. Will this be the week we see a day with 200,000 cases? We're on pace for 250,000 deaths soon, amid this intense fear that death rates will soon catch up with these skyrocketing case and hospitalization numbers. And obviously, much tighter restrictions returning in places like Michigan and other areas. The Scott Atlas comments in an administration blocking the Biden transition from the COVID info it needs. Fauci, very clear on CNN yesterday and again this morning on NBC that is harming the effort. Looking at the regions and the restrictions around the country, governors left to take the lead here, some enacting new, tighter measures, local health care systems risking breaking from the strain. Osterholm yesterday saying a few more weeks of this level of activity, and that will happen. Almost 70,000 Americans hospitalized right now, which is 10,000 more than the worst hospital peak of the spring. Michigan orders all high school and college classes online for 3 weeks starting Wednesday, closes indoor bar and restaurant services, theaters, bowling alleys, and more. Whitmer saying, I'm not going to be bullied into not following reputable scientists in the wake of the Atlas comment. In Illinois, that 30-day Chicago stay-at-home advisory starts today, as does a 10-person limit on social gatherings. We've got Adrian Broadus up in Chicago. South Dakota is just its own brand of horror. Hospitals filling up, a positivity rate over 50%, more than half of tests coming back positive. A state still resisting a mask mandate, obviously hosted these huge events over the summer, never canceled the state fair. William Haseltine telling USA Today the Dakotas are, quote, as bad as it gets anywhere in the world for death rates. In this absolutely remarkable New Day interview with this South Dakota ER nurse who talks about dying patients still in denial of COVID in their final moments. And we've got Lucy Kavanaugh up in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. North Dakota, very late in the game, finally implementing a mask mandate, tighter restrictions in Washington and New Mexico. And then the Texas story. Texas now back to its highest ever level of cases. Peter Hotez in Texas, of course, warning that other regions like the Panhandle and Lubbock are getting hammered and could be the next El Paso type situation. We've got Omar Jimenez in Dallas on the Texas story. On the education story, obviously with numbers like these, schools and parents are confronting big decisions once again. New York City dodged a threatened return to remote learning today. Positivity rate still under 3%, but obviously they're watching day by day. That could change. I mentioned Michigan, and big picture, it really has become a just patchwork of districts around the country, some opening, some closing, some loosening some restrictions and tightening school restrictions, or vice versa. As Osterholm put it yesterday, do you want to keep schools open, or do you want to have bars and restaurants open? We've got Bianca Goladriga on the education front. A little more now on vaccines and developments there and the distribution question. Azar on ABC this morning suggesting that the issue is not finalized as to which are the first groups to get priority vaccinations. He says, is it seniors in nursing homes? Is it first responders and healthcare providers? He says it'll be whatever adds the most value and that the CDC guidelines will be finalized when all the data is done. Again, stressing this Moderna vaccine, according to its claims, is less sort of daunting in its storage requirements, which could be a game changer for distribution. It can be kept in a freezer typically found in doctors' offices and pharmacies. Of course, we continue to hear from states very worried about distribution, worried about lack of money, lack of staffing, lack of logistical plans ahead of a rollout. Azar suggesting this morning that states' worries are overstated. He says they don't actually touch the vaccine, which is not the impression that states are under. There's a call with governors this afternoon. So clearly all this adds up to some level of confusion, and Sarah Murray is working to sort through that. One other health headline as we continue to talk about the racial disparities. The CDC laying out a fresh look here. Latino people hospitalized at the highest rate, 4.2 times that of whites. Native American and Black people both about 4 times the higher hospitalization rates, thought to be linked to higher rates of workers in essential jobs, often without health care or time off. From the health team, we've got Elizabeth Cohen available through the day, Sanjay starting with the DC shows, and a package that rolled out this morning for how we got here, the bad decision. And we've got the wrap pieces today. Erica Hill for 3, 5, 7, and 9, Nick Watt for 4, 6, 8, and 10. There you go.
Thank you very much, Matthew. Does anybody have any thoughts on COVID they want to bring up?
I think that the Captain Sebelius interview this morning on New Day was really important because she gave credit to the Trump administration for Operation Warp Speed and getting, where now 2 companies are at the point of having what seem to be really effective vaccines. And so I think it's important to acknowledge that while still, continuing to hit home how much the administration has flouted every single public health measure and guidance and, all of their errors, as you just said, that, there's a package about all of their mistakes. But, I think it's important to at least give credit as it relates to the vaccine.
Okay. Other thoughts? Okay. Look, I just think COVID is really running rampant in a huge way in this country, and we have to be completely focused on it. The other story, of course, is out of Washington, so let's move there, and Virginia.
Okay, so with the backdrop of the description that Matthew just had we have an administration who is not only not helping, but is actively hampering the COVID response. 65 days now until the Biden administration takes over, and there is zero cooperation. The president, for his part, after briefly seeming to suggest yesterday that Biden won, he followed that up quickly with the lies about how he stole the election. And he has then turned back, as he is this morning, to basically claiming he won the election and conceding nothing. Twitter quickly slapped a misinformation label on that. The key problems right now are mostly in the distribution of this vaccine. Ron Klain over the weekend talking about how this is all about the distribution. It's going to hurt the response, the fact that they have not had any cooperation. Aides are saying this morning that it would be private distribution, and Fauci to Jake, and then again this morning elaborating on how this handover is really problematic if it isn't handled correctly. Then there's this Scott Atlas, just amazing tweet last night criticizing Michigan's new restrictions, suggesting people rise up against the measures. Whitmer's response, it took my breath away. So that's COVID. Then in terms of the national security briefing, that is another place that could cost lives. That is, there is no cooperation. We learned this after 9/11. And we have a bunch of Republicans now coming out and saying that the president should move forward on this, but there is no sign that that is happening anytime soon. On the Trump legal issues, they are crumbling by the moment. We had all these states called. Rudy Giuliani has been put in charge of these legal strategies because no one else seems to want to have anything to do with them. The campaign has abandoned its claims in Pennsylvania. On Friday alone, 9 cases in the states were dropped. And then David will talk about Biden, but on the stimulus, there are no signs of negotiations on Capitol Hill, much less a bill, and whether or not the Biden administration gets involved in pushing that still remains to be seen. And the president, for his part, has no events on his schedule today. And that's what I got.
Okay, let's move to politics and David before we open it up.
Good morning, Jeff. Well, I mean, as Virginia just laid out, the transition story today is one where the administration is still refusing to actually begin a transition. And you heard the incoming chief of staff, Ron Klain, over the weekend make the case that there are workarounds and they can meet with drug companies as they plan to do to discuss this. But you are now hearing more and more that this ascertainment from the GSA needs to happen, and the transition does need to get underway. Klain also went on to say the president's Twitter feed doesn't determine who won this election. The American people did that. But even Alex Azar this morning, he said it would not be appropriate now to talk to the incoming Biden folks because the GSA hasn't formally launched the transition. Obama, part of his book tour, he made clear on 60 Minutes last night the advice that he would give to Trump is to look beyond himself and understand the needs of the country. Of course, there's nothing about that marries up with all we know about President Trump and his behavior to date. Some Republicans like Mike DeWine yesterday and Asa Hutchinson continue to add their voices saying that the briefings should go forward, and yet they're not. So what Biden and Harris and the transition team plan to do is to try to show every day that they're on the job. Now, you saw last week Joe Biden tried to display calm and that the whole GSA thing is not that big of a deal and they could do everything they need to do. He seems more and more like the only person that thinks that is the case at this point with 65 days to go. We will see him and Vice President-elect Harris at 1:45 p.m. today in Wilmington. They are going to be getting a briefing on the economy. They're going to be talking about economic recovery, their plan to build back better. And as Virginia mentioned, I have no doubt that the immediate short-term needs on a potential stimulus, even in this lame duck period, will come up as well. Biden may take questions today at that event from the press, and Arlette Saenz is there covering the president-elect. In addition, later this week, other things that they, want to do in the transition. Either it's more staff announcements or more briefings like this, or the meetings with the drug companies, all to show that they can stay on this job and conduct a transition, even though the Trump administration has not formally started one. But again, from every corner now, you're hearing the importance to get the formal transition underway. A couple other notes. You saw Arlette Hines' story yesterday about the diversity in the Biden-Harris transition team, majority female, 40% people of color. They put out their diversity statistics yesterday, so folks can take a look at that. The former president, Barack Obama, who continues his book tour in advance of the publication date of his book tomorrow, in addition to the 60 Minutes stuff, this morning has an NPR interview, and in The Atlantic, he talks about things from our extraordinarily fragile democracy, as it appears to be, our politics, the current state of media, tech companies. He's just musing aloud in really interesting ways about this moment in our time as he's doing this, and so it's worth folks taking a look at. I think there's a lot of good fodder there to serve as basis for conversations that we may want to have throughout the day. In the Georgia runoff, not a ton of activity today. Raphael Warnock just added some healthcare events. We do see some new ads, and I think we're now up to $70 million already in ad spending and reserved ad time through the end of this year, which is just extraordinary. Kyung La is down there available to come up live. She's also working on some longer-term pieces down there. And for your 2024 campaign notes, I know it's only been a couple weeks since Election Day, but Larry Hogan, the Republican governor of Maryland, is addressing the future of the Republican Party in a speech this morning. Obviously, he has hinted at his desire to perhaps be a presidential contender, and it is quite clear he comes from a different wing of the party than the dominant life force of the Trump wing of the Republican Party, if you can even call it a wing. It is the Trump Party. So Larry Hogan trying to sort of frame where somebody like him can fit into this Trump-era Republican Party or post-Trump-era Republican Party. And we will hear from him on that this morning. And I think that's where we start.
Okay, let me open it up for thoughts on politics, White House, Trump, Biden transition. Okay, let me give a couple thoughts while others consider if they want to say anything. In no order here. To David's point, I do think the Obama comments throughout his interviews, whether they're CBS Sunday Morning, 60 Minutes, The Atlantic today, are all really interesting, and we should continue to look at them more on the bigger picture about society. I do think that Obama is always of great interest to our audience. Biden and Harris are going to speak this afternoon, as was noted. I do think that we should continue. Let's see if he takes questions. He took 5 last week. We should continue to advocate for much more visibility and press availability. We've asked where Donald Trump is. Joe Biden should be taking questions too. We should be pushing that. Drew Griffin did a piece this morning on Rudy Giuliani and his role in all of this, which is frankly just career-ending, and I would advocate that piece should run more, and we should discuss the terrible role of Rudy Giuliani. I do think we need a little bit more insight and context on what is Donald Trump up to in terms of his behavior. He knows he's going to lose. He knows he's lost. He knows he's leaving the White House. What is he doing in terms of sending out these tweets, gathering information, wanting to raise money, setting himself up for the future? What is his longer term game here? What is he after? And I think we should try to get at that. I don't think it should always be we're just shocked that he says, that he's not conceding. Of course he's not conceding. He knows he lost. What's he after? A secondary piece of that is the behavior of people like Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio. Why are they doing what they're doing, and their behavior as well? And I think getting at that as well. And then finally, Joe Biden's going to give this economic speech today. I don't think we should ignore it afterwards. We should really look at what is he proposing. We should use his words. It shouldn't just be about the Trump side of the equation. What is Joe Biden's vision for the economy that he's going to lay out? Other thoughts?
Jeff?
Yes, Jim.
As quickly as Kathleen Sebelius gave them some credit this morning for instituting warp speed, she went off really hard on the Republican Senate leadership, which you just brought up. It's just good sound to use if anyone's having that conversation. And the other thing I was just wondering about is, are there any levers that other people have? I mean, can the House go after Emily Murphy? Can they hold her in contempt? Can they try to arrest her? I mean, it seems like somebody needs to push back, and I don't see who does that or how they do that. I mean, I guess the campaign could file a lawsuit, which they appear to have decided not to do. But, you're saying that we all know Trump's lost. He knows he's lost. He's gone. But the fact that he keeps this game going does disturb people, and it makes them wonder whether or not, there's still going to be this never-ending attempt to figure out a way to overturn the results. Or it's so odd. It's so crazy.
Yep, I agree. Other thoughts?
Hey, Jeff, it's Sarah Seidner. I just wanted to quickly, you're talking about Donald Trump and why is he doing this, and I think money, if we looked at the amount of money people are donating still out at the march, a lot of people, I just asked them questions, and there were quite a few people who were donating money to try to stop this deal, and I think a lot of this, underneath all this, there is a huge money aspect. It would be really great to get at just how much he has gathered.
Yeah, well, look, I don't know that we'll be able to get that exact number, but I think that is one of the driving reasons here, and I completely agree with you. I guess my point is, even if we can't get at the exact number, we need to get at that point.
Yeah.
Other thoughts? Is there anything else in Washington?
I just want to mention this Ted Wolf story about how there's a new effort to get him confirmed. Priscilla booked that on Friday. It's now clear why. Over the weekend, a federal judge saying that Wolf was not legally serving when he ordered the limiting renewals for DACA, so that those rules are invalid. And that's what it is.
Okay. Domestic, anything else?
Just very quickly, SpaceX, another key moment tonight in this sort of new era of commercial space flight, the Resilience docking with the space station at 11, Rachel Crane at Kennedy Space Center. And then just a story we're working on out of Louisiana, mystery, lots of questions about police response surrounding the death of a black 15-year-old. Kawan Charles went missing, was found dead in a sugarcane field days and days later. Police at first didn't search, didn't issue an Amber Alert, didn't think to take it seriously. And we're working on that to be up on digital today. And that's it.
Okay, international.
So just starting off with COVID, obviously we're very much focused on the vaccine news, but we've got a really strong piece that Matthew Chance has done out of Russia, looking at the real numbers there. Clearly there hasn't been a lot of truth coming out of the government there, and the death toll could be as high as 130,000. We've got access to a hospital, which is a hospital that the government wanted us to see, but we also got separate video showing the reality of overcrowded hospitals elsewhere. So that's a really good piece that's coming out for the lead today. We're also looking at the situation across Europe. Merkel is due to announce some tougher restrictions later today.
it could go on for 5 to 6 months. Austria goes into a second lockdown. We've got Mexico passing the million mark. Matt Rivers is on that. Fred Pleitgen is on the Europe angles. And Max Foster is looking at Boris Johnson, who's back in isolation after he was exposed to an MP with COVID. On the election, we're just tracking Pompeo's trip to Europe and the Middle East. He visits France today and meets with Macron. Melissa Bell is on that story, just looking at how world leaders will react to him on this trip. And then a few other stories. Belarus is back in the news again. 1,000 protesters were detained on Sunday. This is the highest number of protesters detained in a single day since this whole crisis began. It came after an anti-government protester was beaten to death by security forces. Fred Pleitgen is on that. We're keeping track of Hurricane Iota. Weather is on that, and Patrick Ottman is also going to package that later today. And also Quest is going on a United flight today where everyone has to take a rapid test before they go, just to kind of effort for the airline industry to get things going there. He's live at Newark and packages later.
Okay. Thank you. Business?
Jeff, good morning. U.S. stocks poised to hit an all-time high following the Moderna news. The Dow could open at 30,000 points, crossing the milestone for the first time in history. Right now, we're up about 420 points. And of course, if we hit that milestone, await a Trump tweet. We know the president tends to measure the economy by means of the stock market. So we have Christine Romans available on that this morning, and we have Allison Kosik at the New York Stock Exchange. And of course, as David and Virginia laid out, monitoring Biden's remarks on the economy later today. We'll be all over the details and the vision moving forward. It's going to be a tough one for Biden, as we know. He's already going to be hamstrung by the transition process, likely face a GOP Senate. COVID-19 continues to rage out of control. And of course, you know, there is the potential to oversee a sharp economic bounce back, but that all depends on stimulus. And with no stimulus in sight, the economic picture in America at the moment is quite dire. Small businesses closing at an astonishing rate, 10 million Americans unemployed, and an estimated 11 to 13 million renters will face risk eviction. We sent that out this morning. Christine Roman's also up and available on that. And of course, as Mira mentioned, we are following the airline industry as well. Airlines desperate to do anything to portray safety as their bottom lines disappear. United making this announcement this morning that it will have a daily flight from Newark to London, and every passenger will need to take a free COVID-19 rapid test. Quest all over that. And finally, in misinformation, we continue to track Rebecca Mercer. This is the prominent conservative donor who announced that she's now helping bankroll Parler. That is the rapidly growing but controversial conservative social media platforms that everyone is flocking to. And of course, it's the home of large amounts of misinformation. CNN Business and the media team up and available on all of those threads this morning. And that's where we start.
Okay. Does anybody else have any thoughts?
Hey, Jeff, it's Cynthia. I just want to bring up a story that perhaps we can weave in some point today. I just think it's important. While all of this has been going on in Peru, we've been dealing with the musical chairs of the presidency. So while Trump was being taken out of the election, so was President Vizcarra. He was replaced by President Merino, and they woke up today without a president. So the crowds have thronged into the city of Lima, and now they woke up without a president again. So within the span of a week, democracy has shown itself to be a disaster because of the fact that they don't trust their elections, and they have exactly been seeing what happens when people can't count on the trust of their democratic processes. And so it is important because there are almost 700,000 Peruvians living in the United States. I just wanted to mention it because it might be an interesting story to weave into what happens when people stop trusting the democratic institutions. And it is something happening right next door, anyway.
Okay. Anyone else?
Hi, Jeff. This is Chandrika. This morning on New Day, we had on a nurse from South Dakota who spoke about how many of her patients, even when they were dying of COVID, they refused to believe they had the virus, and some even said maybe they had lung cancer. It kind of shows the intersection of politics and the pandemic. And when you tie it up with people like Atlas calling for people to rise up, it just shows how dangerous it is for not only for the country, but also for individuals who seem to be almost brainwashed.
Yeah. Well, I think that's what we're dealing with right now. I think you're right. Other thoughts?
That actually reminds me of something that came across over the weekend. I think it was on our air where we had the president of the American Medical Association. Basically, she said never again should physicians have to fight a war on two fronts. So the medical professionals are exhausted because of what they have to do to fight COVID, but to fight this public relations war, this misinformation war, has taken a real toll. And I thought those were very strong comments.
Yeah.
Jeff. Yeah, Jeff. Regarding Operation Warp Speed, now we have two. I don't know the answer, but I think it's important for us to demystify whether the administration deserves credit or not regarding what just happened. And I don't know whether we assign that to somebody or it's a discussion on shows. But to be fair, is this a success story for the administration or not?
While we've been on this call, as expected, Trump has taken credit for it.
Well, I think to Rick's point, though, why shouldn't they get credit? So if that's the case, we should be more than willing to give them the credit if that's where it's due. If it was because the government put up all the money that made it possible, I don't know the answer. I'm just asking these questions. We should absolutely give credit where credit is due.
And that's what I was trying to say earlier. And the point is, you can give credit and still talk about how basically the administration made an intentional decision to sacrifice what could be 400,000 lives because they, refused to abide by public health measures and that, and all the other mistakes they made. I mean, we should give credit and then tell the rest of the story.
Yep. I also want to point out and make sure that we're continuing to note that in the popular vote in the presidential election, the margin is now 5.5 million votes, and there's still quite a bit more to come in. So let's make sure we also note that.
Hey, it's Rebecca. I just want to add one thing. Richard mentioned Parler. We talked earlier about, at the beginning of this call, about audience numbers and Fox is confused. I do think there's a much bigger story to do about the complete realignment of right-wing media and the attempts by, Trump world to buy it. And it's just the story of the misinformation. I think it's all one giant story that our audience is really interested in because so much of our audience sees that as what's fueling the problems, and that's what Obama alluded to. So I think it's a big story in all those strands. The Wall Street Journal story over the weekend, there's just a lot that can be brought together.
So I think it's a very good observation. I do feel that Brian Stelter has been doing that to a degree, but I think you're right that we can do it in a broader way. I do not think it's I don't think it's about us in doing so. I think that what is going on in the conservative media realignment is a really important story. It is part of what I was talking about when I opened today and said that our competition is very confused at this point. It is absolutely true. It's one of the reasons that I think audiences have flocked to us. But I do think that, to Rebecca's point, it is going on, it is real, and it is a real business/media story. In fairness, I do think that we've been covering it, and I think that the media team has done a really good job with it, but I think we can continue to do it and bring it together in a bigger way. So I agree. Anyone else? Okay, let's move to digital, please.
Hey, good morning. We had 39 million uniques on Friday, super strong Friday. Saturday and Sunday were each at around 31 million, so a strong weekend. The number one piece of content, just standalone story over the weekend was this awesome story from Orton, Bennett, and Scannell. Jared and Ivanka are poised to return to a Manhattan social scene that no longer welcomes them. That still has legs for today. The Investigates piece on Roger Stone being behind a massive misinformation effort also did really well. And then last night, our SpaceX DLE got it passed 80,000 concurrents. So, anything over 10,000 is good, and that's a Sunday night, so that's awesome. The top videos over the last 24 hours, the big runaway was Tapper breaking down Trump's legal cases / attempts. That got a huge audience on the app. And then the SpaceX launch with the moment after liftoff being described as 8.5 minutes of terror. This morning, it's Compton at number one with about 17,000 concurrents on Trump's failure to work with Biden is becoming more urgent and problematic as COVID spreads. Then it's the Moderna vaccine with that 94.5.5 percentage number. That's 11,000 concurrents. We've got all the logical sidebars like the stocks poised for new records on that news, updates to our coronavirus Q&A, focusing on, one of the big questions here is the distribution. How will that roll out? Who will get it? All of that. So we're just going to stay tight. There's a lot of conversation on social we are seeing that is probably the big question and topic of conversation across all of our flagship accounts this morning around the vaccine and who's going to get it and when. The coronavirus DLE is also in the top 5 this morning. Scott Atlas urging Michigan to rise up against new COVID numbers. And then Fox News has never seen competition like Newsmax. So Jeff, to your and Rebecca's point, we are on that, and there's a lot of audience interest, so we will stay on that. A handful of things up and coming that are super strong. Here are 7 Trump healthcare measures that Biden will likely overturn. That's Tammy Luby and co. We do have the fact check coming on Trump's bonkers weekend of false tweets from Daniel Dale. We are staying on the huge wave of evictions that is very possible in January when that CDC order is set to expire. Plus, remember, no stimulus. So this is really big, and it's, we see it coming. So we just absolutely want to stay on this and tell kind of personal stories about who's going to lose their home in the middle of winter in the holiday season as COVID continues to spike and not a lot of help to come. So we're going to stay big on that. We're also staying on the personal stories, including this heartbreaking one about the 5-year-old in San Antonio who is spending his birthday alone after losing both parents to COVID. We've got a really good suite of Thanksgiving-related content. The latest is don't rely on a negative test to see your family for Thanksgiving, and then all kinds of great stuff from Sanjay and team on what to do and not do for Thanksgiving. So we'll continue to keep that out. Mira mentioned Boris Johnson. We've got a great analysis that just published 10 minutes ago from Luke McGee. He's trapped at home at the worst possible time, the self-isolation, and also staring down the possible Brexit crash out. And then lastly, given all the interest in SpaceX that we saw last night, we will be all over the docking with the ISS tonight. That's it.
Okay. Yeah, I agree that we should stay focused on that. It's clear that our audience is interested in that. John.
Good morning. So the Moderna vaccine news is in the top spot right now with Elizabeth Cohen, the really high efficacy rate, and then just how this stacks up against the Pfizer vaccine when it comes to distribution, and seems to just present less challenges than the Pfizer vaccine. With a lot of doctors on to discuss this big moment, Peter Hotez, Dr. William Schaffner, Dr. Michael Mina, as well as Dr. Niraj Shah of Maine CDC, who really is going to drill down into some of the distribution challenges that states are facing as these vaccines get closer to being pushed onto market. And then the other piece of the COVID story, the alarming hospitalization rates and the death number approaching 250,000 in the U.S. We're going to continue to hit these different date lines, highlighting South Dakota with Lucy Kafanov, Omar Jimenez in Dallas. 1 million cases now in Texas. Also, the food bank store lines are extraordinary. And then Eric Hell does have our COVID rat piece at 3 o'clock. We have a lot of bookings to zero in on the states and cities stepping in to put their own restrictions in place due to the vacuum from the federal government. Jim and Poppy with Chicago's health commissioner. John King has the Illinois Public Health Department looking at it from the state level. Kate has the head of the county where Portland, Oregon is. They're putting some big restrictions there. And then Brianna and Brooke have doctors on the front lines, one from Idaho, one from Iowa. The Iowa doctor featured in Atlantic magazine saying the outlook is very, very grim there. They're very nervous about what's happening in the ICUs. And one other flagging the book on Brianna, Artie Duncan, who tweeted out his entire family suffering from COVID. They say it's mild symptoms, but it's just knocked them down pretty hard. And he just uses that as an opportunity to put the Thanksgiving warning out there again, saying whatever you can, do not go to big Thanksgiving gatherings. You want to avoid this at all costs. Other domestic web headlines that we're hitting: El Paso inmates assigned to work in the morgue. Massachusetts schools shut down after a big party, and then we will get Quest up from Newark Airport, the United Airlines and testing storyline. Christine Roman stays on the Wall Street News, stocks shot up on Moderna News. Internationally, we will hit the Boris Johnson storyline with Max Foster, and then Fred Fleigen has Merkel and the new restrictions in Germany. Transition chaos: Jessica Dean and Arlette Saenz are in Wilmington. The transition delays and the big concerns it has about managing COVID once the Biden administration takes over. We are going to land on that 1:45 speech today. Abby Phillip, Roy Borger, and Julia Chatterley on the back end to discuss whatever news is made there. We'll see if he takes questions. Joe Johnson, Caitlin Collins at the White House, where Trump keeps spewing conspiracy theories. Daniel Dell does a big fact check on everything that they say over the weekend. And that Drew Griffin reporting on Giuliani, his piece that is getting on today. Jeff, some other bookings: Georgia's lieutenant governor on the recount and Trump's attacks against the recount efforts and against Kemp and the Secretary of State. Trevor Potter on the Pennsylvania case. And finally, Tim Naftali and other political voices on everything Obama's had to say the past 24 hours to both CBS News and Atlantic Magazine.
Okay. Thank you, Washington.
Morning. At 4 o'clock, we've got Jeff Zeleny on Biden, Caitlin Collins on Trump, Abby Phillip, Ron Brownstein, and others as well for context, and also Julia Chatterley on Biden's econ remarks, the markets reacting to Moderna, and more. Nick Watt has our coronavirus wrap spot, and Sanjay, of course, and we booked Governor Kate Brown on Pence's call to governors on vaccine distribution, and of course, Oregon's sweeping restrictions, and she warns violators they could face jail time and hefty fines. And we'll have that Matthew Chance donut on COVID in Russia as well.
And in the Situation Room, we'll obviously be staying on these continuing record-setting numbers as COVID is running rampant. We'll follow the developments with the Moderna vaccine, look at how it compares to Pfizer, and we'll hit all of these hot spots, including Michigan with the Scott Atlas Rise Up comments, Illinois, the Dakotas, Texas, and elsewhere. So we'll get into all of that with Sanjay and the Watt and Hill wrap pieces. We also have Dr. Luciano Borio, one of the doctors on the Biden task force book. And then obviously we'll be following all the transition developments, the administration's refusal to cooperate. We'll watch Biden at 1:45, see if he takes questions and see if he lays out a vision for the economy. And then we'll get into obviously Trump's incessant tweets and false claims, these lawsuits and information gathering, and discuss his end game in all of this. What is he after? As well as the implications for the Biden team, Fauci calling it problematic, and the national security implications. We'll continue to track the popular vote, the margin continuing to grow, and then we'll also be following on all the Obama interviews from over the weekend, and we have Jeffrey Goldberg booked. That's where we're starting.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there anything else anybody wants to bring up?
Hey, Jeff, it's David. I do think it's worth reaching out to the Hoover Institution for comment about Scott Atlas's remarks, since their mission is peace and prosperity for Americans.
Yeah, I actually think that's a really good note. I do think that Scott Atlas continues to need to be called out, and getting reaction from his place of employment, I think, is a good idea. Let's make sure we're doing that in Washington. Any other thoughts? Anybody else? Okay, then let me wrap it up where I started, which is there's a ton going on. The audience is coming to us in television and in digital. Let's make sure we continue to provide them the news. Let's stay focused, newsy, urgent. There are several main stories. Let's stay on them, and let's continue to make sure that we get it right, play error-free ball, and deliver for our audiences. Have a good day, everybody. Thank you.